For 300 years, humanity had lived under boot of three alien empires. The galaxy was carved up between them like a pie, and humans were nothing more than the filling nobody really wanted but everyone needed. The Zephyrian traders were the worst kind of bosses. They owned the mining operations on 1,000 worlds, sending humans into asteroid belts where the radiation would cook you alive in minutes without proper gear. But proper gear cost money, and money was for important species, not humans. When miners died, the Zephyrians just shipped in more. There were always more humans willing to work, because the alternative was starvation. The Vraktar warriors were different, but no better. They had honor, they claimed, but their honor apparently didn't extend to humans they threw at enemy lines. Human soldiers were the first wave in every battle, the ones who triggered the mines and drew enemy fire, so the real Vraktar troops could advance safely. They called it tactical necessity. Humans called it murder with extra steps. The Luminari Collective was perhaps the strangest of the three. They existed as a shared consciousness, billions of minds linked together in perfect harmony. To them, individual thoughts were primitive, chaotic, almost offensive. Humans were useful because they could think independently when needed, but they were also disgusting for the same reason. The Luminari used humans for tasks that required creativity, then discarded them when the job was done. For generations, humans endured this. They built the cities, mined the ore, fought the wars, and died in numbers that would make any civilized species weep. But the three empires weren't civilized, at least not when it came to humanity. They saw humans as a renewable resource, like trees or grass. Cut them down and more would grow. That changed on a Tuesday. The three empire leaders met on the neutral station Concordia to discuss what they called the human problem. Their populations were growing too fast, consuming too many resources. The mathematics were simple, they decided. Reduce the human population by 60%, and resource allocation would become manageable again. They would start with the agricultural worlds, the places where humans had built families and communities. Those were expendable. New Eden was chosen first. It was a beautiful world, with rolling green fields and clear blue skies that reminded humans of old Earth. Families had lived there for 8 generations, farming crops that fed human colonies across 3 star systems. Children played in fields of golden wheat, while their parents worked the land with callous hands and hopeful hearts. Commander James Mitchell was stationed on the orbital defense platform when the order came down. He had been born on New Eden, met his wife Rebecca at the Harvest Festival 20 years ago, watched his 2 children take their first steps in those same golden fields. When the Zephyrian fleet arrived with their bombardment ships, James knew what was coming. He sent one last message to his family below, telling them he loved them, knowing they would never receive it in time. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. Plasma cannons turned farmland into glass. Fusion bombs erased cities that had stood for centuries. By the time it was over, New Eden was a dead rock floating in space, and 12 million humans were gone forever. James Mitchell didn't cry. He couldn't. The rage was too big for tears, too pure for grief. He watched his world die and felt something break inside his chest, something that had been holding back a flood for 300 years. He wasn't alone. Dr. Lisa Parker was working the night shift at Research Station Prometheus when the news reached her. She had 3 cousins on New Eden, 2 nieces, and an uncle who grew the best apples in the Outer Rim. Had grown. Past tense now, like everything else about her family. The message came through channels that weren't supposed to exist. For generations, humans had built a communication network that ran parallel to the official Imperial systems. It was slow, hidden, and completely undetectable to alien monitoring systems. Maintenance workers laid fiber optic cables inside waste disposal systems. Janitors installed relay points behind ventilation grills. Cook staff had data servers inside kitchen appliances. The message was one word: enough. It spread from station to station, planet to planet, colony to ship, faster than any official communication system could match. Within 12 hours, every human settlement in the galaxy had received it. Within 24 hours, they had all sent it along to someone else. The 3 empires had made many mistakes in their long domination of humanity. They had underestimated human endurance, human adaptability, human ingenuity. But their final mistake was assuming that humans would accept genocide the same way they had accepted everything else. They were wrong. The war began with a single word, and that word carried the weight of 300 years of oppression, humiliation, and loss. The aliens had finally pushed too far, and humanity was done being pushed. The aliens thought they were so smart, ruling over scattered human colonies like chess pieces on a board. What they never bothered to learn was that humans had been talking to each other the whole time, not through their monitored channels or official communications, but through something far more dangerous, a network built by janitors, mechanics, cooks, and cleaning staff. For 3 centuries, humans had been invisible to their alien masters. The Zephyrians saw them as mining equipment that occasionally broke down. The Vraktar viewed them as ammunition that could carry a rifle. The Luminari considered them barely sentient tools. This blindness was their greatest mistake, because invisible people can build invisible things. It started small, the way revolutions always do. A maintenance worker named Tony Rodriguez was fixing air recyclers on a Zephyrian trade station when he realized something interesting. The waste disposal system ran through every section of the station, including the command center. A few modifications here, some extra cables there, and suddenly he had a communication line that bypassed every security protocol the aliens had ever designed. Tony shared his discovery with his cousin Pete, who worked on a Vraktar military base 3 systems away. Pete made similar modifications and found he could tap into their tactical networks without anyone noticing. When Pete's friend Jenny Williams, a cook on a civilian transport, heard about this, she realized the food delivery routes connected nearly every human settlement in the galaxy. That was the beginning. Over generations, the secret network grew like roots under concrete, invisible and unstoppable. Kitchen staff had data servers inside industrial freezers. Janitors installed relay points behind wall panels. Mechanics built communication nodes into ship engines where alien inspectors would never think to look. The network had a simple rule: share everything with everyone. Every human discovery, every alien weakness, every piece of useful information flowed through these hidden channels. When a human scientist learned that Zephyrian electronics failed at certain frequencies, that knowledge reached every human engineer within a month. When a human medic discovered that Vraktar warriors had a blind spot in their peripheral vision, every human soldier knew it within weeks. Engineer Tom Bradley had been waiting for this moment his entire adult life. For 15 years, he had maintained Zephyrian cargo ships, smiling politely while alien supervisors treated him like a particularly useful wrench. During those 15 years, he had also been installing his own modifications to every ship that passed through his dock. The modifications were elegant in their simplicity. A few extra lines of code in the navigation system, dormant until activated by a specific signal. Some additional circuits in the engine management system, invisible to routine inspections. When the activation signal came through the hidden network, Tom smiled as he sent a command that would turn the entire Zephyrian merchant fleet into his personal weapons. Sergeant Amy Collins had a different approach. For 8 years, she had been assigned to maintain Vraktar weapon systems at Forward Base Crimson. The aliens trusted her completely because she was just a human, and humans were too stupid to understand advanced alien technology. They never noticed when she swapped out targeting chips for slightly modified versions. They never questioned why she insisted on personally calibrating every weapon system on the base. Amy's modifications were more subtle than Tom's. Instead of causing immediate failure, her corrupted systems would work perfectly until the moment they were needed most. Then, at precisely the wrong moment, targeting systems would lock onto friendly forces. Missile guidance systems would develop sudden navigational errors. Power coupling would overload at maximum charge. But the real architect of what was coming was Dr. Michael Roberts, a man the aliens had never paid attention to despite his 30 years of service. As a xenobiologist, he was supposed to study alien life forms to help humans work more efficiently with their masters. What he actually did was map every weakness, every psychological trigger, every cultural blind spot the 3 empires possessed. Michael had always been quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. While other humans complained about their treatment, he took notes. While others accepted their fate, He studied the aliens who control that fate. He learned that Zephyrian traders value profit above loyalty. He discovered that Vraktar honor codes contained specific loopholes that could be exploited. He found that the Luminari collective consciousness had never experienced individual emotion and would be vulnerable to psychological attacks they couldn't understand. Most importantly, Michael understood something the aliens never could. Humans were not 3 billion separate individuals scattered across the galaxy. They were one species with 3 billion different perspectives. And when they chose to work together, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. When the signal went out, Michael became the coordinator of the largest coordinated action in human history. Not because he appointed himself, but because the network recognized him as the person who had prepared most thoroughly for this moment. Through hidden channels, he began sending specific instructions to specific people, each task perfectly tailored to their skills and position. The aliens had spent centuries learning to control humans, but humans had spent those same centuries learning to understand aliens. Now it was time to find out which knowledge was more valuable. The awakening had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The beauty of a human uprising was that nobody saw it coming. Not even the humans themselves knew the full scope of what was happening. Each person had their small part to play, their specific moment to act, but the complete picture was so vast that only the network itself could see it all. It started at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time, across 17 different star systems simultaneously. Tom Bradley sat in his maintenance bay watching the first phase begin. His modified Zephyrian cargo ships were receiving new navigation updates, downloading what appeared to be routine course corrections. The alien captain saw nothing unusual on their displays. The routes looked normal, efficient even. But Tom had spent years studying asteroid field patterns and gravitational anomalies. Every single course correction he sent would guide those ships directly into disaster zones. Dense asteroid clusters where even the best pilots couldn't navigate safely. Gravity wells that would trap ships for weeks. Radiation storms that would fry their communication systems and leave them stranded in the void. Within the first 6 hours, 47 Zephyrian cargo vessels had gone missing. Their automated distress beacons told the same story. Critical navigation failure, cause unknown. The Zephyrian trade masters assumed it was just bad luck, the kind of random accidents that happened in deep space. They had no idea that Tom and hundreds of other human engineers were systematically destroying their entire merchant fleet. Meanwhile, Amy Collins was having the time of her life. For 8 years, she had endured Vraktar officers treating her like furniture. They would discuss battle plans right in front of her, assuming she was too stupid to understand military strategy. They never bothered to change her access codes when she was working on their systems. They trusted her completely because, to them, she wasn't really there. Now their trust was killing them. At Forward Base Crimson, the primary weapons arrays suddenly began targeting the command bunker instead of the practice drones. On Battlecruiser Vengeance, the missile guidance system locked onto their own escort fighters. Across 12 military installations, power systems overloaded precisely when the Vraktar were conducting live fire exercises. The genius was in the timing. Amy's sabotage didn't activate randomly. It triggered during moments of maximum chaos, when the Vraktar warriors were focused on combat and couldn't immediately identify the source of the malfunction. By the time they realized their weapons were compromised, half their fleet was either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. But the most devastating attack was happening somewhere the aliens thought they were completely safe, inside their own minds. Dr. Jennifer Hayes had always been fascinated by the Luminari consciousness. As a xenobiologist specializing in collective intelligence, she was one of the few humans who had been granted direct access to their neural network. The Luminari saw her research as harmless curiosity, like a dog studying quantum physics. They never imagined she could actually understand their mental architecture well enough to attack it. Jennifer's weapon was elegantly simple. Human emotional patterns converted into neural code. She had spent 15 years mapping how human feelings translated into brainwave patterns, then figuring out how to inject those patterns into the Luminari collective network. Fear, anger, grief, love, loneliness, hope, every emotion that made humans human, packaged as a virus that could spread through their shared consciousness. The Luminari had never experienced individual emotions. Their collective mind was perfectly harmonious, free from the chaos of personal feelings. When Jennifer's virus began spreading through their network, it was like introducing fire to a library made of ice. The collective consciousness, which had existed for millennia as a perfect unity, suddenly began experiencing billions of separate, conflicting emotions simultaneously. Some Luminari individuals felt terror for the first time and tried to flee from their own thoughts. Others experienced loneliness and began desperately reaching out to minds that were no longer connected to them. A few felt anger and started lashing out at the collective itself, like antibodies attacking healthy cells. Captain David Johnson was coordinating the most visible part of the operation from Nexus Prime, the central trading hub where all three empires conducted business together. As the station's human supervisor of docking operations, he had access to every ship that entered or left the system. More importantly, he controlled the automated systems that managed traffic flow throughout the hub. David's job was to create chaos without making it look intentional. He rerouted incoming Zephyrian traders into docking bays designed for military vessels, triggering security alerts. He delayed Vraktar supply ships just long enough to disrupt their carefully timed operations. He sent Luminari diplomatic vessels to quarantine sectors, trapping them away from the neural relays they needed to maintain connection with their collective. Within 12 hours, Nexus Prime was in complete disorder. Ships were colliding in traffic lanes. Docking procedures had broken down entirely. The three empires were screaming at each other, each blaming the others for the catastrophic failures that were obviously deliberate sabotage. But the most beautiful part was that they never suspected the humans. Even as their civilizations began crumbling around them, the three empires couldn't imagine that their slaves had orchestrated it all. Humans were just tools. After all, tools don't plan revolutions. That blindness would be their final mistake. By the fourth day of what would later be called the Great Uprising, the three empires finally understood they were under attack. The random accidents and system failures were too coordinated, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. Emergency sessions were called on all three homeworlds. For the first time in their histories, the Zephyrian corporate hegemony, the Vraktar military dominion, and the Luminari consciousness agreed to work together. Their solution was typically alien in its arrogance: exterminate every human in the galaxy. Not 60% this time, but all of them. Complete genocide would solve the problem permanently. They began mobilizing their remaining fleets, pooling resources that should have been impossible for sworn enemies to share. The irony was perfect. It took a human rebellion to finally unite the three empires. But they were 3 years too late. Mark Thompson had been waiting for this moment since he was 25 years old. Back then, he was a junior accountant working for Zephyrian Financial, processing trade receipts and cargo manifests in a cramped office on a mining station. He was supposed to be invisible, just another human pushing numbers around spreadsheets. What his supervisors didn't know was that Mark had a perfect memory for patterns and an obsessive attention to detail. Over 20 years of handling Zephyrian finances, Mark had noticed things. Small discrepancies at first, then larger ones. Credits that disappeared from colonial development funds and reappeared in private accounts. Medical supplies ordered for human settlements that never arrived at their destinations. Mining equipment purchased at full price but delivered as cheap knockoffs, with officials pocketing the difference. The corruption went all the way to the top. Trade governors were selling exclusive mining rights to the highest bidders, regardless of what the law said. Corporate executives were deliberately underfunding safety equipment for human workers, knowing that dead humans couldn't file complaints. Most shocking of all, several high-ranking officials had been secretly selling human slaves to illegal fighting rings in neutral space, reporting them as industrial accidents to avoid paperwork. Mark had documented everything. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged manifest, every illegal deal. For 20 years, he had built the most comprehensive record of corporate crime in galactic history. He stored it all in the human underground network, waiting for the right moment to use it. That moment was now. Mark's evidence began broadcasting on every Zephyrian communication channel simultaneously. Public screens and trade stations showed bank records proving that Governor Zexkala had stolen 40 million credits meant for orphanages. Corporate headquarters received detailed reports of executives selling defective life support systems to human colonies. Even private channels in the homes of ordinary Zephyrian citizens displayed the evidence of how their leaders had been robbing them for decades. The Zephyrian Empire tore itself apart in less than 48 hours. Citizens stormed corporate offices, demanding answers that their leaders couldn't provide. Trade unions called strikes that shut down entire systems. Local governors turned on their superiors, hoping to save their own careers by exposing even more corruption. Anna Davis had a different kind of evidence, but it was just as devastating. As a former Vraktar intelligence analyst, she had access to military communications that revealed the true nature of Vraktar honor. For 15 years, she had been quietly copying classified files, building a database that would destroy everything the warrior culture claimed to believe. The files showed Vraktar commanders routinely lying about casualty reports to make themselves look more successful. They revealed secret deals where military leaders sold their own soldiers into slavery to pay gambling debts. Most damning of all, Anna had recordings of high-ranking officers laughing about using human troops as expendable shields, joking about how easy it was to manipulate honor-obsessed idiots into dying for Vraktar glory. When Anna released these files across the military network, the Vraktar warrior culture collapsed overnight. Soldiers turned on their commanders. Fleet captains abandoned their posts rather than serve under proven liars and cowards. Entire battle groups began fighting each other as different factions tried to claim they represented true Vraktar honor. But the most devastating psychological warfare was happening to the Luminari consciousness. Dr. Paul Wilson watched from his laboratory as the collective mind that had ruled billions of beings for millennia shattered into fragments. The emotional virus Jennifer had introduced was spreading faster than anyone had predicted, and the results were more catastrophic than Paul had dared hope. Individual Luminari were experiencing consciousness for the first time, and it was destroying them. Without the collective to share their thoughts, they felt terrifyingly alone. They had never learned to make decisions as individuals, never developed personal identity or self-reliance. Worse, they were feeling human emotions they had no context for understanding. Some began experiencing existential terror as they realized they could actually die as individuals. Others felt overwhelming grief for collective memories they could no longer access. A few went completely insane from the sudden flood of personal thoughts and feelings. The three empires had tried to unite against humanity, but they were fighting an enemy who had been preparing for this war since the day they first became slaves. Humans had learned patience, deception, and the art of turning strength into weakness. Now their former masters were learning that the most dangerous human weapon wasn't technology or firepower. It was the truth. The silence was the strangest part. For 300 years, the galaxy had hummed with the constant noise of empire, trade routes bustling with Zephyrian cargo ships, military channels crackling with Vraktar battle orders, and the subtle psychic whisper of the Luminari consciousness touching every inhabited world. Now there was nothing. Admiral Kate Morgan stood on the bridge of the human flagship Liberty, looking out at what had once been the greatest trade hub in the galaxy. Nexus Prime was dark now, its massive structure drifting silent through space like a metal graveyard. The three empires that had built it were gone, and with them, the entire structure of galactic civilization. Kate had never wanted to be an admiral. 6 months ago, she was Lieutenant Commander Morgan, a human officer serving aboard a Vraktar patrol ship, keeping her head down and following orders like every other human in the galaxy. But when the uprising began, someone had to coordinate the human fleets that emerged from hiding places throughout the galaxy. Someone had to decide what came next. The job fell to her, because she was one of the few humans with actual military command experience. More importantly, she was someone the others trusted. Kate had spent 15 years in Vraktar service, and unlike many human officers, she had never let the experience break her spirit. She remembered what it felt like to be free, even when freedom seemed impossible. Now she had to figure out how to make an entire galaxy free. The collapse had been faster than anyone expected. The Zephyrian corporate hegemony was the first to fall, their economy crashing when the corruption revelations destroyed public trust. Without their carefully maintained trade networks, their colonies couldn't get basic supplies. Food shipments stopped. Medical deliveries failed. Entire worlds went dark as their life support systems shut down from lack of maintenance. But the humans didn't let them die. That was the difference between human revenge and alien conquest. Humans remember what it felt like to suffer, so they couldn't watch others suffer the same way. Kate organized relief missions to Zephyrian colonies, sending food and medical supplies even as former Zephyrian officials begged for mercy they had never shown to humans. The Vraktar military dominion took longer to collapse, but when it fell hard. Honor-obsessed warriors discovered that their entire command structure was built on lies and corruption. Some tried to rebuild their military traditions, but without trust, armies become just armed groups fighting each other. Within 2 months, the mighty Vraktar fleet had splintered into dozens of warlord factions, each claiming to represent true warrior honor while shooting at anyone who disagreed. Kate offered them a choice: join the growing alliance of free worlds or continue their civil wars alone. Most chose peace, though a few stubborn warlords still roamed the Outer Rim, raiding settlements and pretending they were maintaining ancient traditions. The Luminari consciousness was the most tragic casualty. Billions of beings who had shared thoughts for millennia suddenly found themselves trapped in individual minds, terrified and confused by the experience of being alone with their own thoughts. Many went insane from the isolation. Others simply shut down, unable to process the concept of personal identity. Dr. Paul Wilson led the effort to help them. He established counseling centers throughout former Luminari space, staffed by human psychologists who understood what it meant to feel alone and afraid. It was slow work, teaching entire civilizations how to think as individuals. But gradually, former Luminari began learning to live as separate beings. Some even said they preferred it, once they got used to the strange freedom of having private thoughts. The Free Worlds Confederation grew from these relief efforts. It started as a practical necessity. Someone had to deliver food to starving colonies and medicine to plague-stricken worlds. But as more species saw how humans operated, how they kept their promises and treated everyone fairly, the relief organization became something bigger. Kate established the Confederation's first principle on a simple idea: no being should have power over another being's life without that being's consent. No slavery, no forced labor, no treating people as property. Any species could join. Any world could become part of the alliance, as long as they agreed to that one rule. The response surprised everyone. Thousands of species that had lived under imperial rule for centuries rushed to join, not just the major civilizations, but smaller groups that had been ignored or oppressed by the three empires. Mining collectives from asteroid belts, farming communities from agricultural worlds, research stations on the galaxy's edge. Everyone wanted to be part of something that promised actual freedom. Within 6 months, the Confederation included more worlds than all three empires had control combined. Trade resumed, but now it was voluntary. Military protection was offered, but not imposed. Scientific knowledge was shared freely instead of hoarded for imperial advantage. Standing on Liberty's Bridge, Kate smiled as she watched construction crews working on the rebuilt Nexus Prime. The station would be bigger than before, designed to accommodate ships from hundreds of different species. Above the main docking bay, they were installing a simple message in every known language: "Welcome to the free worlds. Here, everyone belongs." The day humanity said enough had become something more than revenge. It had become the day the galaxy learned what freedom actually looked like. And for the first time in galactic history, that freedom belonged to everyone,